You grow up being told who the good guys were. Their faces are in your textbooks, their names on roads and schools, statues, national holidays, quotes about freedom and courage. You're surrounded by this idea that these people were heroes. No questions asked, just pride, because why wouldn't you? They're supposed to be the best of us. But then you get older, and things start to shift. You hear something, read something, notice something that doesn't quite add up. And so you ask, just a little question, hey, is that the whole story? And suddenly everything gets weird. People get defensive. Conversations shut down. You feel like you said something you weren't supposed to say. Because here's the truth. You were never supposed to ask the truth about historical heroes. But let's talk about it today. Let's start with Winston Churchill. In most Western history books, he's painted as the fearless bulldog of Britain. The man who faced down Hitler, rallied a nation, and helped save the free world. And sure, his wartime speeches were powerful. His leadership during World War II was significant. But that's not the whole story. Not even close. Churchill was also a committed imperialist who believed in white supremacy. He wasn't just a man of his time. He actively shaped the policies of the empire with brutal consequences. During the Bengal famine of 1943, Churchill's decisions, particularly blocking food shipments to India and diverting supplies to British troops and stockpiles, played a direct role in the deaths of nearly 3 million Indians. When Indian leaders pleaded for aid, his response? He blamed the famine on Indians for breeding like rabbits. And yet, you don't hear much about that when people quote him like a life coach. Now take Mahatma Gandhi, a global symbol of nonviolence. The man who led India's independence movement through peaceful resistance. He's the face of calm, of wisdom. He's been canonized by world leaders, quoted by presidents, and praised in every school textbook. But Gandhi was also deeply flawed, especially when it came to race, gender, and caste. In his early years in South Africa, Gandhi made overtly racist statements about black Africans, calling them uncivilized, expressing disgust at sharing facilities with them, and lobbying for segregation. His activism wasn't for everyone. It was at times exclusive and hierarchical. He spoke of Indian unity, but often ignored Dalits, women, and other marginalized communities in that vision. His experiments with celibacy, including sleeping next to young women to test himself, were not only strange but deeply inappropriate. It's not that his legacy is worthless. It's that the whole picture is more complicated than the sanitized version we're handed. And most people aren't ready for that. And then there's Thomas Jefferson, the man who wrote, "All men are created equal," a founding father, a lover of philosophy and liberty. And yet, Jefferson owned more than 600 enslaved people in his lifetime. He didn't just inherit slavery, he maintained it, expanded it, benefited from it. One of those enslaved people was Sally Hemings, who bore him children. She was his property, meaning she couldn't legally consent to anything. Historians now recognize that this was not a romantic affair. It was exploitation, a power imbalance so stark it should shock us. Jefferson wrote about the cruelty of slavery, even as he refused to free the vast majority of people he enslaved. He wasn't conflicted, he was complicit. He helped build the system and profited from it while pretending to wrestle with its morality. That's not a contradiction. That's the blueprint of power. Here's the hard part. These aren't minor footnotes or products of their time. These truths reshape everything. They expose how heroism and harm often existed side by side, and how history tends to remember only what makes us feel good. The uncomfortable reality? These men weren't just flawed. They were gatekeepers of the very oppression they're now credited with challenging. They knew how to perform virtue in public while maintaining control in private. That's how they got remembered as heroes. They mastered the narrative. And that's why asking the whole story still feels like rebellion, because we were never meant to question the heroes. Just salute them, quote them, repeat the myth. However, if we truly want to understand history, not just inherit it, we need to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. We need to ask even when we're told not to. And then there's Henry Ford, the man who put the world on wheels, the genius behind the Model T, the assembly line, and the modern concept of mass production. In most tellings, Ford is celebrated as a visionary, a symbol of innovation, hard work, and American success. His name is practically synonymous with progress, but behind that legacy is a much darker truth. Ford wasn't just a brilliant businessman, He was also a raging anti-Semite and a vocal racist. His factories, while offering jobs to black workers, kept them segregated and stuck in the most dangerous, least desirable roles. He believed black people were inferior, not quietly, not passively, but actively, through policy and practice. And his hatred of Jews, that went even further. Ford funded and published a series of rabidly anti-Semitic articles in a paper he bought specifically for that purpose. The series, titled The International Jew, was later compiled and distributed internationally, including in post-World War I Germany, where a young Adolf Hitler read them. Hitler openly admired Ford. He cited him in Mein Kampf. He kept Ford's photo on his office wall. In 1938, Ford was even awarded the Grand Cross of the German Eagle, Nazi Germany's highest honor for a foreigner, and Ford accepted it. This wasn't ignorance. This wasn't just of the time. This was deliberate influence, the kind that shaped ideologies, stoked hatred, and helped build the intellectual foundations of fascism. We like to talk about Henry Ford's legacy in terms of industry, but legacy doesn't end at the factory doors. It follows what we build and who we choose to leave behind. And then there was Alexander the Great, a name so soaked in glory that it practically echoes through every marble hallway of Western history. The conqueror of Persia, the builder of one of the largest empires the world has ever seen. By the age of 30, Alexander wasn't just a king, he was a myth in the making. But myths are messy when you get close. One night during a drunken banquet in 328 BCE, Alexander got into an argument with a man named Cleitus. This wasn't just any soldier. Cleitus had once saved Alexander's life in battle. He was a trusted general, a friend, but none of that mattered once tempers flared. One insult turned into another, and before anyone could intervene, Alexander, still fuming and drunk, picked up a javelin and drove it straight through Cleitus's heart. He regretted it immediately. But regret doesn't undo murder. This is the man we call the Great, a man who could build nations with one hand and destroy relationships with the other. A brilliant strategist, but also an impulsive killer, not above throwing a deadly tantrum when challenged. His empire was vast, but his self-control wasn't. And yet history tends to focus on his victories, not his violence. But when we overlook the whole truth, we overlook the people who paid the price. The colonized, the enslaved, and the silenced. The ones who resisted quietly, who fought without fame, who were never carved into marble or mentioned in textbooks. We call it patriotism, but too often it's just selective memory. We defend statues because the truths they hide are too uncomfortable to hold. But here's the thing. Asking questions doesn't erase history. It uncovers it. It breaks the fairy tales and forces us to see the complicated, human, often brutal reality beneath the myth. And maybe that's where the real courage lies. Not in worshiping legends, but in challenging them. Perhaps the real heroes are the ones whose names were buried, not celebrated. Maybe the truth isn't easy, but it's necessary. So ask. Ask loudly, ask publicly, ask until the silence breaks. Because of that uneasy feeling, what resistance you face, that's history pushing back. That's how you know you're getting closer to something real. And if you want more stories like this, raw, honest, and unfiltered, subscribe to the channel. Let's keep digging. Let's keep questioning, because the past isn't dead, and neither is the truth.